If you rent, people love to tell you you're paying a stranger's mortgage. If you own, you're paying your own. That's the whole argument in one sentence, and it's missing the most important part. Because whichever choice you make, there's a second pile of money moving in the background that you never see. For the renter, it's the equity you're not building. For the buyer, it's everything that down payment could have become somewhere else.
Home prices hitting fresh highs as home equity also nears records.
Record amount of equity, and they're finally starting to tap it more.
The average mortgage holder saw a $5,400 decline in equity in the first quarter from a year ago.
60% of U.S. markets, that according to an exclusive new report from Black Knight.
$4 billion added to that amount last quarter. Many Americans have seen serious increases in home value in recent years.
That is how much you own of your house versus what the bank owns.
Nobody puts that pile on the table when they say rent is dead money. So this isn't a video about which option is cheaper this month. It's about what you trade away the second you pick a side. Because you are trading something either way. And most people can't name what it is. In the next few minutes, you'll be able to. Here's the belief almost all of us start from, whether we say it out loud or not. Renting is money gone forever, and buying is money that comes back to you. Rent is throwing money away might be the single most repeated line in personal finance. And it feels obviously true. You pay rent, the landlord keeps it. You pay a mortgage, and one day the house is yours. That belief isn't wrong, it's just half the picture. It treats buying like a decision with no cost, when buying has a price almost nobody calculates. What that same money could have earned somewhere else. Economists call that opportunity cost. And here's the twist most people miss. It doesn't just apply to the renter who never buys a house. It applies just as hard to the buyer who ties up every dollar they have in one.
It's like discouraging because it just feels like the prices are constantly going up, the interest rates are going up.
It's pretty much universally true. Rents are going up all around the country, but it's even more severe.
Mortgage rates are slightly higher today after the disappointing March inflation numbers were released yesterday.
What many people may not realize is that rising rents are a part of that calculation.
Both choices have an invisible price tag. Let's put them side by side and read them out loud. Start with real numbers, so we're not arguing in the abstract. As of June 2026, the median existing home in America costs $440,600, according to the National Association of Realtors. The 30-year fixed mortgage is running around 6.5%, according to Freddie Mac's weekly primary mortgage market survey. And the typical asking rent nationwide is $1,965 a month, according to Zillow's rent index. Put 20% down on that median home and you're handing over about $88,000. Finance the rest, roughly $352,000 at 6.5%, and your principal and interest come to about $2,230 a month. Add estimated property taxes and homeowners insurance, and the payment lands somewhere near $2,800 a month before maintenance, homeowners association dues, closing costs, or other ownership expenses. I want to be upfront that this figure moves a lot depending on where you live. Property tax rates vary enormously by state, and insurance estimates for 2026 range from roughly $2,100 to $2,900 a year, depending on the dataset. So treat this as a national illustration, not your number. Run your own. It also isn't a perfect apples-to-apples comparison. The median existing home and the typical nationwide rental do not necessarily represent the same size, property type, or local market. But within this illustration, the difference is roughly $800 a month. That gap is what the rent and invest argument depends on. Now here's the part that gets skipped, that $88,000 didn't vanish. It turned into home equity, but it also stopped being available for anything else on earth. So run the other version. You rent and you invest that $88,000 plus the roughly $800 a month you're not spending on ownership. Where does that end up in 20 or 30 years? The S&P 500's long-term total return, including reinvested dividends, has averaged roughly 10% a year before inflation across its history. That's a decades-long average, not a promise. Some years it's up 30%, some years it's down 20%. It is not a savings account, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. So here is an illustration, not a forecast. If that $88,000 head start and $800 a month earned 7% annually, it would grow to roughly $773,000 after 20 years, and about $1.7 million after 30. At 10%, the same contributions would reach roughly $1.3 million after 20 years, and $3.6 million after 30. Those figures are before taxes, fees, inflation, and the market returns you receive could be much lower or higher. That is not the renter's final score. It still has to be compared with the home's future value, the remaining mortgage balance, and the costs of owning it. Meanwhile, the homeowner's house may gain value too. And here's the buyer's hidden advantage that many comparisons undercount. You control the entire $440,600 asset with only $88,000 down. So when the house appreciates, the gain applies to the whole property, not just your original stake. That's real leverage, and it's one of the strongest arguments in the buyer's column. But leverage works in both directions because a decline also affects the whole property. Long-term housing data compiled by economist Robert Shiller shows home prices growing more slowly than stocks over extended periods. That doesn't mean every house gains value or that stocks win in every time frame. An individual home is one concentrated, illiquid asset in one local market. For current context, the National Association of Realtors has national prices up just 1.8% over the past year, so the trade comes into focus. The renter's money, if invested broadly, sits in a more volatile but liquid and diversified asset. The owner's money is locked into one local asset that has historically grown more slowly, but also serves as the roof over their head. That is the opportunity cost the standard rent is dead money argument leaves out. But owning has its own hidden costs, and they're just as real.
Buy a home, or try that is, the cost of a typical starter home has never been higher.
The prices are high, the rates are high, the insurance is high.
Mortgage rates hitting their highest level in 3 months, just as global tariffs threaten to drive up the costs.
American families are feeling the squeeze.
The first one is what your mortgage payment is really doing in the early years. On that $352,000 loan at 6.5%, over the first 3 years, you'd pay roughly $67,600 in interest and reduce the loan principal by only about $12,600. That's separate from your down payment and any change in the home's value. The principal reduction comes, but it comes slowly at the start, and almost nobody knows that going in.
Home repair procrastination costs homeowners thousands.
That helps lead to a record low rate of new home ownership all across the country.
The second is maintenance. A common rule of thumb among real estate professionals is that upkeep runs 1% to 2% of a home's value every year. On a $440,600 house, that's $4,400 to $8,800 annually, on top of everything else. A new roof, a dead water heater, a foundation problem nobody saw coming. Renters generally don't pay those major repair bills directly, although landlords still account for expected costs when setting rent. The third is being locked in place. If a renter's job moves, they give notice and go. A homeowner who has to sell early can lose money fast because closing costs and agent commissions come straight out of whatever equity they've built. And as we just saw in year 3, there may not be much principal reduction yet. So here's the full picture, and neither side gets anything for free. The renter gives up equity, forced savings, and some protection against rising housing costs. A fixed mortgage keeps principal and interest steady, but property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and homeowners association dues can still rise. The owner gives up flexibility, liquidity, and the higher long-term growth that the down payment and that $800 a month might have earned somewhere else. 2 different bets, 2 different prices, both real. So who wins? Start with the behavioral catch. The rent and invest case only works as modeled if the renter invests the difference. If you rent instead of buy and then spend that $800 a month on nothing in particular, you give up the main wealth-building advantage that made renting competitive in this example. That does not mean renting automatically loses. A short stay, high home prices relative to rent, selling costs, or weak local appreciation can still favor renting. It means you cannot claim the investment outcome without doing the investing. The homeowner at least has a form of forced principal repayment built into the monthly mortgage. Past that, it comes down to 3 things: how long you'll stay, what you truly do with the money, and your local market. On the first one, there's a useful benchmark. The National Association of Realtors 2025 profile of home buyers and sellers found buyers expect to stay in a home a median of 15 years, and that the typical seller had owned their home for 11 years before selling, an all-time high. Those are long horizons, and that matters because time allows principal reduction and possible appreciation to offset the costs of buying and selling. If your realistic horizon is 3 years, not 11, the outcome can look completely different. Buying tends to favor people staying put for a long time, people who value a more predictable principal and interest payment over the flexibility of a lease, and markets where rent is high relative to home prices. Renting tends to favor people who'll move within a few years, people who would genuinely invest the gap rather than absorb it into their lifestyle, and markets where home prices are steep relative to rents. It also favors anyone who puts real weight on flexibility itself, on not needing to sell a house before taking a job or moving for family. The person who benefits least from buying stretches to afford the payment, has nothing left over for the repair bills, and may need to move again soon. The person who benefits least from renting would happily stay in one place for decades, has steady income, and would never invest a dollar of what they saved. There's no universal winner here. There are only your specific numbers, honestly run. Here's the one thing worth holding on to after this ends. Renting versus buying isn't a smart choice against a wasteful one. It's two different bets on where your money grows best. One in a house you live in, one in an account you don't. Neither one is dead money. Both carry a price you're paying whether you notice it or not. The people who do best with either choice tend to be the ones who know exactly what they gave up to make it. So tell me in the comments, which trade-off matters more in your life right now, building equity or keeping your money flexible? And if breaking decisions down like this beats being told what to do, subscribe. Worth It Finance takes the big money choices, asks whether they're worth it, and lays out the math so you can decide for yourself. See you in the next one.